Boop, 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 boo. Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Or anybody. I have no idea. I don't get to see the stats. Using OBS, unless there is a way to see the stats using OBS that I'm just unaware of because, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing. But welcome to Fantasy Island and Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're live in the den Sunday. What the heck is it? The 18th of January. So we're halfway through the first month of 2026. And boy, what a quiet, peaceful time it's been in the whole world today. Good news for me is I actually got my butt out in the garage, got my weights going, hit the bench, did a little shoulder press, squat, bench press. It's been a couple, 3 months, and I didn't really lose from where I was last time I was doing it, but I'm definitely down from where I was a few years ago when I was doing it a lot more intently. I see a yikes from Lady Wendelin. What is the yikes for? I see a hello from Mr. Sushi Hut. Hello. What's the yikes from? Lady Wendelin? What did I do? Did I do something dumb? Well, I know I did something dumb. Any rate, oh, you mean yikes maybe for the year. Okay, yeah, I got you. Hello, Adam. Oh, for a month half over. Yeah, I know. I think it was in the last stream I was talking about that like my brain is so intent on the week to week of what I'm doing with the channel, the videos I got, the videos I need to make and edit and blah, blah, blah. You break the year down into just 52 weeks, and we're already 2 down. It's like, wow, it goes a lot faster than when you're thinking day to day. But welcome to everybody. Oh, Anton's in there too. Thank you, Herculoids. Yeah, that was one I got for Christmas. Just threw this one on. It's maybe a little bit wrinkly. That's okay. I'm a wrinkly guy. Well, actually, if I was not as chubby as I am, I would be a wrinkly guy because I'm in my 50s. So, welcome to everybody. What is going on? Well, the big news, obviously, pop culture-wise, this week was Kathleen Kennedy stepping down from LucasFilm. Stepping down. In other words, yeah, I feel like it's time to go. And which brings up the question of, well, what comes next for Lucasfilm and Star Wars? Because obviously, Star Wars is not exactly on the ascent right now. They're having a lot of problems, monetarily speaking. And so they wonder, is it going to get better? What's the future hold? Now, given who has stepped in to not entirely fill the role left behind, but more or less in the same roles they've been in, Dave Filoni and a lady, I can't remember her name, but she's kind of handling the financial side. They were already there. So the only thing that's really changed is that Kathleen Kennedy's not going to be officially in charge. And other than that, it's basically exactly the same as it's always been. So what does this mean? Well, I put some numbers together because it's what I do. And I was kind of just interested in looking at really, let's put all that other stuff aside and understanding that your opinion of a particular Star Wars movie, TV show, whatever, it's subjective, right? Now, what's not subjective is it getting the views? Is it selling the tickets? Is it widely popular? That's not subjective. That's a matter of fact. Although figuring out how many views some of these things are getting is a little bit tricky. The old ratings system on TV worked a little bit better. But so I put together some stuff because I wanted to look at the 3 different trilogies, the original, the prequels, the sequels. And how did they do? Can we use that as a way to measure the trajectory of Star Wars, as an IP? Now, we're going to be looking at domestic box office. There's still global box office. There's merchandising. etc., that goes with all of this stuff. But you figure this is probably a pretty good way to gauge things in general. So here we have 1977's Star Wars. So we got a few figures there. So let me tell you what they are. The first one is the actual box office from 1977-78 of $775.4 million. That's what that movie made. Now, if we adjust that to 2019 dollars, I'm using 2019 because that's when the final film of the final trilogy was released. It made $4 billion, the equivalent. Now, if we further adjust it for population, because remember, there's a smaller domestic population in 1977 than there is in 2019, it'd be the equivalent of making about $6 billion. And that is why there's a Star Wars IP to this day, $6 billion. But just using the $4 billion figure, not worrying about the population, we got a movie that had a $57 million budget. And therefore, it likely made profit in the area of $3.9 billion. Very impressive. Remember, this is a film, Lucas held on to those merchandising rights because he thought, I don't know how much money the movie's going to make, but I might make some money selling toys and t-shirts and all that other kind of stuff. So obviously the movie did extremely well. Now, worldwide would have been a little bit different because you didn't have some of the global markets that you have nowadays. That's why we're not worrying about it. But obviously, it sold a lot of merchandise, but it made a lot of profit just in domestic box office. So that's what really gets the Star Wars IP rolling. It's followed up, of course, in 1980 with Empire Strikes Back. Now, here we have about $2 billion. So from about $4 billion in 2019, so we're just going to mostly talk about that figure, 2019 dollars. From about $4 billion for the first film to $2 billion for the second film, but still made a tidy profit of $1.8 million. And you notice the budget went up, budget more than just doubled, right? Now, if it hadn't, maybe you make more profit, but on the other hand, movie might not have looked as good as it did. And Empire Strikes Back looked really good in terms of the special effects. Some of the stuff with the Millennium Falcon, going through the asteroid field and all that. So there's some really, really nice stuff that went on with that. But you notice we're in the second film in the trilogy, and it takes a sharp decline. That's pretty normal. And you're going to see that with a lot of these, trilogies. And then we get the finale for the first trilogy, 1983's Return of the Jedi, $1.5 billion. So again, down a little bit, $1.1 billion in profit, down a little bit. And they actually backed off on the budget on this one. And again, there was some really stunning stuff. The giant space battle around the second Death Star, really good stuff. So there's our first trilogy. Now, if we take that trilogy as a whole, it made about $7.7 billion in ticket sales on a $300 million budget. So about $6.7 billion of profit in 2019 dollars for the first Star Wars trilogy. It's pretty damn good. All right. 1999. So here we are, quite a bit later, with a new trilogy, the prequels. So the first one in 2019 dollars makes about $2 billion profit. So about half of what Star Wars had made, about what Empire did. 1.3 billion in profit. Again, pretty close to what Empire did. But $221 million budget. So the budgets have gone up, which is, what you expect. But here's something interesting to me, at least, about sci-fi movies. This one was filmed with a lot of green screen. There was still practical effects going on, but a lot of green screen, presumably to save money. And obviously through the trilogy, you got a lot more in terms of the CGI, right? It's supposed to save money on effects, but the budgets are higher. So are they saving money on effects? I'm not sure. This is something I think Hollywood maybe needs to start looking at. we got to use CGI to save money, and our budgets are getting bigger than ever. And you're going to see when we look at the sequels, that same kind of thing. So we got Phantom Menace, 1999, about $1.3 billion in profits, but not bad. That's pretty darn good. We follow it up with Attack of the Clones in 2002, which does about $1.2 billion in ticket sales. Only about $550 million in profit. So the profits are going down on these things. And they're going down pretty steadily. And then we get Revenge of the Sith, which actually does better than the second film, with $1.5 billion, almost $1 billion in profit. But you notice that budget, the budgets went from 221 to 206 to 186. So the budget was going down steadily for the prequels. Now, the prequels were not super well received by general audiences at the time. But the kids at the time really dug it. But I have to ask, did it have the same impact on, say, the millennials that the original trilogy had on Gen X? Because that's important for the ability for it to hold attention into the future. Did it make quite the same impression? I'm going to guess probably not, but I think it did make a big impression. There's a lot of love for this trilogy out there from millennials, so I think it did pretty well in that regard. Fast forward 2015 and The Force Awakens with about $2.8 billion in ticket sales. All right, which is pretty good, better than the prequel trilogy, but only $646 million in profit. So about just a little better than the worst so far in this whole saga. But look at that budget, $730 million. What were we at last? 186. 186. About $200 million per film for that second trilogy in terms of budget. 730. In other words, it had a bigger budget than the prequel trilogy combined. In fact, let's see, it has almost the same budget as both of the trilogies that preceded it combined. A lot of CGI, etc. But that budget is what really hurts the thing in terms of profitability. Now it's followed up with what was it? The Last Jedi, I think it was called, in 2017, $1.7 billion in ticket sales. The budget cut in half, close to in half for this one, $570 million in profit. So again, it's right down at the lowest ebb so far for profit. And then we do the final one from that trilogy. And you notice we went from the black to the red, because this one did $1.4 billion in ticket sales, essentially $750 million budget. So they popped that budget right back up. Profit, negative 900. So almost lost $1 billion on this thing. So again, if we look at the three trilogies, the first one generates about $7.7 billion adjusted in ticket sales. If we adjusted for population, about $11 billion, $6.7 billion in profit. The second one, the prequels, do about $4.7 billion in ticket sales. We adjust for population, we're at about $5.4 billion. So about half what the original trilogy did, with $2.8 billion in profit. Again, a little less than half of what the original did. We get to the third, the sequels. They did about $5.9 billion in ticket sales. Okay, when you adjust for population, it's just about the same as the prequels. Both of those did about the same, but only $329 million combined in profit for that third trilogy. Well, again, look at the budgets. About $300 million for the first trilogy, a little over $600 million for the second, so doubled. $1.9 billion, $2 billion in budget for that third trilogy. So holy mackerel, more than double the prequels. So what do we get from this? Well, we see a general trajectory downward in profits, but not necessarily a downward trajectory in ticket sales. Now, of course, we get a couple other movies in this era that don't do very well either, but it seemed like with Force Awakens, there was an opportunity here. People were willing to go to this movie. People wanted to go see this movie, and a lot of people kind of dug it, but the follow-ups didn't do as well, right? But I think you see, well, okay, there is an audience for Star Wars at this point. We're talking 2015 for the first one, 1977 for the original movie. So we're at what, 80s, 90s? It's 40 years later. 40 years later, there's still a fairly good size audience out there. But look at the budgets. So there's really kind of two stories going on here. One is the creative direction of Star Wars working? It seems like maybe it's not, in terms of drawing in a mass audience. Well, that's the Dave Filoni side. Is Dave Filoni going to do something distinctly different from Kathleen Kennedy in terms of the creative direction of Star Wars? Well, no, because he's been sort of in charge of the creative direction already, and his big project, the Ahsoka TV series, did unbelievably poorly. It did not do well. So is he the guy who's going to save things from a creative standpoint? No. Okay, the woman who's on the financial side, look at these friggin' budgets. And this is a problem not just with Star Wars. This is a problem with Lucasfilm. It's a problem with the Marvel stuff. It's a problem with other studios. They're all spending too damn much money. Well, we have to. It's for the CGI. We have to spend all this money because it's saving us a ton of money. Does not seem to be the case. They're making the original trilogy, again, adjusting for inflation, for significantly less than you're making the sequel trilogy. So are you saving money with these things? I don't think you are saving money with these things. I think you need to go back maybe and look at that, at those special. Now, I'm not looking at the special effects budgets, and maybe they are different. I don't know. If so, where the hell's all the rest of this money going? It's killing you. So there's two issues, creative and financial. And it kind of seems like you're still in the same boat as you were before Kathleen Kennedy left for either of those things. I think if they wanted to bring back people who have basically said, I'm kind of done with Star Wars, I'm out, I think what they needed to do, to be quite frank, is fire Kathleen Kennedy. Not have her leave on her own in her own way with a little exit interview. They probably needed to fire her, which in the old days is exactly what Hollywood bosses would have done. We're losing money now. The popularity shifted. You're out. They could be nice about it. They didn't have to be nice about it. But either way, we're letting you go. That's the way they basically tell people, we see the problem. We know you're kind of PO'd. We're dealing with it. Feige should have probably been fired a little while ago, too, from Marvel, because they're not doing well. And it has to do with the decisions they're particularly making. But they didn't do that. So they didn't send that signal of like, we get it. We're going to make some big changes. They're kind of like going, nah, we're cool. It's good enough. It's where we want things to be. We're okay with this. Now, look, if you are a fan of the newer Star Wars stuff, hey, rejoice. You're probably going to continue to get the same kind of stuff you've been getting. If you're not a fan, sorry, you're probably not going to see any major changes coming. But given that trajectory of profits, it's pretty damn grim, and I don't see how they keep that up. But there you go. That's pretty much my take on the future of Star Wars is going to look like the last decade of Star Wars. I don't think we're going to see any particular change at all until you see somebody brought in with a very different creative vision. Now, maybe that creative vision is going to be, we're going back to basics. We're going back to the original trilogy. We're going to wipe out a lot of this new stuff and say that it doesn't count anymore. We're going to film like the Timothy Zahn novels. You could have that, or you could be somebody with a very radically different one, but maybe one that's going to sell to a new generation. Because like I brought up before, Star Wars clearly had a major impact pop culturally on Gen X. The prequels had a definite impact pop culturally on the millennials? Did the sequel trilogy have an impact on Zoomers Gen Alpha? I don't think so. If it was, I think it's negligible. Now, that might be because they're just not watching this stuff quite the same way. But let's be honest, when the prequels came out, you had the video game world, you had the internet, you had social media, maybe not smartphones at the time, not sure, but God knows there was a lot of texting going on still with the flip phones, because you had to really know your stuff. I couldn't text on those things to save my life, but you did have those elements out there, and it still managed to make a mark on that generation. I don't think it made a mark on this current generation that we have right now. So if you're starting to make movies again in another 5 years, something like a trilogy, something like a big deal, big budget, right? Not just TV and et cetera. If you're going to do that, are you going to make a big impact on the 10-year-olds of that generation, such that as they grow older, they're going to continue, maybe in smaller numbers, but they're going to continue to buy the merchandise, to want the physical media, to watch it on streaming, et cetera, to go for other projects that are maybe not as blockbustery, but are still out there? Are you going to? Maybe that requires a radically different vision. Maybe it's going to be something that all of us oldsters look at and say, oh, this sucks. This is friggin' horrendous. I'd never watch that, but it doesn't matter because now, Gen X are in their 60s and the millennials are pushing into their 50s, and it's like, whatever. We're kind of beyond some of this. We're still going to go buy nostalgia from our old days, but maybe we don't need to watch the new stuff in major numbers. But if you can take a different vision and bring in the next generation, you're probably okay. But I just don't see that happening right now. That does not seem to be where the interests of, and let's be honest, young men who are a big component of what makes Star Wars work. I don't see them flocking to Dave Filoni's vision of Star Wars. Just doesn't seem likely at this point. So, yeah, I don't know that this really makes any difference whatsoever to Star Wars. I think they needed to make a heavier break and bring in some people with some very different ideas, one way or the other, to try to generate a response. I think with the sequel trilogy, which, just in terms of raw ticket sales, did better than the prequels, right? When we adjust for inflation, but so much less profit. And I think so much less cultural impact. That is my take. Let's catch up on the chat, because I did see some stuff was going. Get this thing to work. Oh, there we go. If I understood how to scroll properly, I would have found it. Anton says, as far as the prequels go, I would say that Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith were probably the better films. Well, Revenge of the Sith definitely seems to have drawn a bigger audience. And I do hear people talk about it a lot more than Attack of the Clones. Yeah, it seems like the weird thing with the Star Wars trilogy was it kind of like went bump, bump, bump. You had Star Wars big, then you go down to then you go Empire. But Empire, everybody loves Empire, critically speaking. That's kind of the popular one. But it went down in terms of the ticket sales, and then down again in Return of the Jedi, which people don't like as well. So you could argue what's more popular, Star Wars or Empire? It's probably actually Star Wars, but Empire, very popular. Prequels seems like started, pretty popular, went down a ways, came back up with Revenge. And it seems like the sequels did the same thing. And by the way, that is normal in a trilogy type situation, to have the middle film not be as popular because it doesn't have the resolution that the first one or the third one has. It's just this sort of middle act that gets you through it. But Empire was so damn great. And I think part of that's because Kirshner came in to direct instead of Lucas. And he's a better director than George Lucas is. I think that's one of the things that helped buoy it up. And there's just some great moments, and Boba Fett. And, there's some really great stuff in that second movie. Did a good job with the balance of like a little comedy, romance, action, etc., forwarding the story. It's just a really, really well done film. So it did better than most middle films do. But yeah, I think you're probably right in terms of, look, I'll be honest with you, completely honest. I didn't like the prequels. I just didn't like them at all. Maybe I'm an old guy. It's fine. No problems with the fact that a lot of people do love the prequels. That's cool. I'm not like one of those guys telling you you're wrong for liking it, but I didn't really care for them. That's why I'm trying to do this analysis, not looking subjectively in, well, how do I rate the films? Now, they do seem to me to be better than the sequels, just from me looking at people's responses and just kind of reading at what the plots were doing. Anton also says, I noticed that when, after they did this new trilogy, when I went to see the Han Solo movie, there was practically nobody in the theaters. Yeah. And some of that might have to do with just the initiation of streaming, and bigger TVs. I don't know that, because, back in the day, you had to wait a little longer for the videotape or the DVD to come out. It's a quicker thing, which is what Netflix wants to do now with them taking over Warner Brothers, is shorter period of time actually in the theaters, quicker into streaming where people can watch it. And according to an interview that Affleck and Damon did, they want action to happen a lot quicker in the film. That doesn't necessarily bother me. Most Bond films started with an action sequence. That's fine, right? But they want you to restate the plot multiple times in dialogue so people don't have to pay attention to the movie. So basically, people have said it's visual muzak. It's background noise for while people are doing other things. I'll put this on in the background. Now, a lot of us do that with movies that we've seen multiple times, We'll just throw it on in the background because our brains can follow it without us really paying attention because we've seen it so many times. To do that with a first-run movie fundamentally changes filmmaking. And I think it's going to drive most talented people out of corporate filmmaking, which is probably fine because corporate filmmaking is going to be taken over by AI one way or the other. It just makes sense. It's going to be more affordable. It's going to get rid of a lot of management problems. It's all going to go AI. The skilled people are going to go into indie film, and I wouldn't be surprised if movie theaters become a place for indie film. There is an opportunity for folks who can create networks and relationships for this kind of stuff, essentially to recreate something not like the old studio system, but that the new Hollywood that emerges in like the 1960s, recreate those sort of studios with helping with funding, with finances, with distribution, so that filmmakers can focus on the creativity, right? And get stuff out there into theaters, into physical media, onto streaming as well, help with merchandise and all that kind of thing. It's going to be a smaller affair than what Hollywood's been able to do historically, but I think it's going to happen. And there's an opportunity there. And there are people who I think are looking into that opportunity and how it works, how they shape it, what they're going to do. But that's the opportunity right now because the corporate AI stuff is at best not going to be artistic. It's barely going to be watchable. People who love to watch movies, really watch movies as opposed to watch movies on their phone. People who love to watch movies are not going to like this corporate stuff. And filmmakers with any kind of talent whatsoever are not going to like making it either. You're just going to get the folks who want to make a buck. You just want to make a few dollars and be semi-rich, although they're going to be paying you less and less because your creativity is going to count for less and less as you go into this stuff. And it's going to sort of do what pop music's done over the last couple decades. You'll see some people online on YouTube talking about that. 2 or 3 guys writing most of the songs, probably a lot of AI in there now. It cranks out product for people to consume, but not the way people used to listen to records and listen to the radio in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe into the 2000s a bit. That is gone. Now, talented artists are still out there, but you got to go look for them because they're not being promoted by the big labels, by the big corporations. They're just pumping out content for you to listen to in the background. And of course, what's going to happen is the indie stuff is going to take over because it has to take over. It's going to be more interesting. It's going to hit people harder. It's going to have to take over eventually. And then the corporations who built up this thing and are going to try to preserve it are going to be taken completely unawares, even though it's obvious, and they're going to be in a lot of trouble. But at any rate, with the original movie, there was a lot of problems. It took time and changes with the script, and then eventually it became a hit. 20th Century Fox. Yeah, exactly. And it did. Oh, hey, Man of War, I'm here, but not here. I'm with you, brother. I'm kind of in that state too, man. Oh, I was almost late to the stream. Because so I'm like chilling out. It's a little after 9 o'clock. And I had in my watch later on YouTube a short comedy subject, like the Three Stooges shorts, right? But starring a dude named Hugh Herbert, who most people don't know nowadays. If you watch old Looney Tunes and you see a dude like in some of the caricatures doing this little whoo-hoo kind of thing, that's Hugh Herbert. All right. He was a comedian. And it co-stars Dudley Dickerson. Now, Dudley Dickerson was a black comedian. He's in a couple Three Stooges shorts. And apparently at one time, Mo was interested in maybe bringing him on to be the third Stooge before they ended up, I think, with Joe Besser. I think it was pre-Joe Besser. And I think he actually would have worked out well. Not a big part in the Three Stooges ones, but he's kind of the co-lead in these Hugh Herbert ones. So it's this one where they got to go to like a haunted house and there's a goon chasing them around. If you know your Stooges, it's a pretty familiar kind of bunch of tropes. So I watched it and then I see, oh my God, there's another one with a dude in a gorilla suit. And that's like my kryptonite. I'm going, all right, I got like 20 minutes. It's 16 minutes. Yeah, I can fit this one in. So I sit and watch those two get chased around by a guy in a gorilla suit. And I ran my butt back here to get ready for this. So my brain is sort of like addled at the moment, but I did it for a guy in a gorilla suit. So I'm not sorry. But yeah, the original Star Wars movie had real problems. And I mean, if we've seen kind of what the original cut was intended to be, yeah, it probably wasn't that good and it probably wouldn't have done that well. And, it definitely got helped in editing. Editing helps a lot of films. And, you know, those of us who just watch them kind of a little passively don't necessarily know that. You got to delve in. I mean, if I learn about stuff like that, it's because somebody else did all the work and they showed me a documentary. You know, I'm not like hardcore enough into film to really break it all down. But editing helps a lot of films. And I think one of the problems they have now is a lack of good editors. They just kind of string together a bunch of stuff without really thinking about it. And really good editing helped, you know, the first Star Wars flick for sure. And then Sushi Hit comes in with the overblown budgets are partly because the filmmakers see themselves as artists. It's pretentiousness over practicality. And I think that is part of it for a certainty. But also every movie now has like 20 to 25 executive producers. Are they just getting their name on the film or are they getting some money? And if they're getting some money, what in the hell are they doing? What are they producing? What are they bringing to the table on this thing? It's absolutely bizarre. And we've seen some big hits over the last few years with very small budgets. I think a lot of it has to do, well, frankly, with what we're seeing with the federal government, where a lot of money going to like fraud and waste. I think the studio system has that too. And various people are getting, you know, they're dipping their beaks. They're getting a little percentage of the take, even though it's making the movies worse and unprofitable. And they don't want to change. They don't want to change. They're going to keep that system going, even though I think we've seen where movies with smaller budgets, which by the way means indie films can compete. Because an indie is not going to be able to pull together, you know, like a $700 million budget for a film. But an indie could maybe get $12 to $20 million for a film, potentially. And if movies making that, you know, made on that kind of money are in a lot of ways out competing the stuff made for 700 million, it opens up the opportunities for indie films. You know, I think there is an opportunity for a smart studio. And I don't mean any of the existing studios, They're dumb. They're over. Executives can't figure it out. I don't see any path forward for any of those things at all. And getting bought out by an Amazon or a Netflix is not going to change anything because they don't know the business. Netflix cannot come in and say, we're going to restructure Warner Brothers because, hey, we're experts at doing this right. Now, once upon a time, a successful studio buying a less successful studio can make sense because they can come in and say, look, we're doing well. We got a model that works. We're going to bring that model to this new studio, make them lean, make them mean, make some profit. That's not happening with like Netflix. They haven't the foggiest what they're doing. If you look at their output, you kind of see they don't have the concept of how to do this. Their budgets are even more bloated. So nothing's going to change when Netflix starts buying people. Nothing's going to change when you basically keep the same leadership in. I mean, nobody's trying to change anything. I don't think they want to change. I don't think they believe they have to change. And I think they're whistling past the graveyard because they need to make some massive changes. They're not going to. The opportunity's out there for Korean films, Japanese films, Chinese films, for sure. For sure. Europe ain't doing nothing. So Europe's not going to be involved in this in the least. Or some startups in the United States. I think they could do pretty well. Will they? Who knows? Probably not. Anton says he is a huge Planet of the Apes fan. I love Planet of the Apes. And Planet of the Apes was like the first Star Wars. You know, really successful movie series with a lot of impact on the pop culture of the day. I don't know if it lasted as long as Star Wars did, pop culture wise. And I think partly that's because Star Wars came in and just sort of interrupted all of it. Man, they had a lot of toys though, t-shirts, etc. And now they've made newer Planet of the Apes films that have done pretty darn well. And it's kind of brought that back into the consciousness. Maybe not exactly the same kind of Planet of the Apes, but it's out there and they've done pretty well with them, I think. I haven't looked at like profitability. I think the last one maybe didn't do quite as well, but overall pretty decent. So, you know, there you go, man. There you go. Well, what else do we got today? I got a couple new acquisitions in the den, nothing major. One of them is it's sort of ending my 2025 action figure saga with Walmart, my inability to get things that I ordered from Walmart. So Mego teamed up with the new Atlas Comics, who are going to try to relaunch a bunch of titles. That was their plan anyways. I haven't seen anything, so I don't know that they are. They team up with Mego to make action figures based on the old Atlas characters. And they produce them, and a lot of us pre-order them. And then nothing. What's happening with these things? And Mego's literally out there going, we made them. We shipped them to Walmart. We don't know. And then, so Walmart cancels a bunch of orders and says, we lost the boxes. We don't know where they are. And I don't know that this was because of the theft of stuff in the harbors in LA. It could have been. I don't know if that's still as ongoing as it was, but they lost them and that's it. Well, somebody found them because now they're showing up on deepdiscount.com. And so I was finally able to order the Grim Ghost, which was the one that I wanted to grab the first time around because he's just a very cool looking character. So it finally arrived. There's the back of the package. And this one does come with a facsimile. You can kind of see back there of the Grim Ghost #1 with it. Now, there were a couple others, martial arts dude, and they had plans for more, and I don't know. It just seems like it kind of petered out. But then again, if you can't get your stuff in front of collectors, what are you going to do? That was a big part of the launch. So I don't know what's going on with Atlas. I will probably get him out of the box, maybe for the next stream. I got a few. I got a couple others that I need to unbox and look at. Maybe we'll do that on the next stream and spend some time on it. The Grim Ghost comic, I've read the first issue, and it's okay. It's not the greatest thing in the world. It is a cool design, though. And I think there's definitely some opportunity to do some stuff with these. And I think there's, well, again, opportunity for indies in the comic book space to get stuff out there if they have the distribution, etc. Rippaverse is kind of like working on that of being not just a creator making comics, but let's, get a warehouse, let's get the distribution figured out, etc. Reinvest in the company and try to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's kind of what they're doing. So another company doing the same, there's some opportunity there as Marvel and DC kind of lose a little bit of the market share to other things. We'll see. I see Anton. They did really well, Planet of the Apes, because they left the people that were making them alone so they could do their own thing. That's kind of how it worked in the old days. Now, not 100%. There was always some studio involvement in things. The artiste had to you got to be commercial, dude. If you're making our movies, you got to be a bit commercial with it. If you want to be super artsy, go do an art house film. That's fine. But these are for, pretty wide release. So you got to curb some of your artistic stuff for something more commercially viable. But that's kind of what it was. It was like, I don't know about this, 40-minute monologue in the middle of the film. That's going to draw people out. What if we shrink that? And what if we put this in? It was that kind of stuff. Not artistic vision, but more, I think, how do you construct this film so it's going to be popular with an audience? But yeah, they had a system, of scripts scripts would lurk in Hollywood for 20 years while people got them polished and ready to go. Interview with a Vampire. That thing floated around Hollywood, again, I think for about 20 years before it got made. Anne Rice wanted Rutger Hauer to play the lead in that, and people go, Rutger Hauer, but he's old. Well, he wasn't old in the 70s. He was young in the 70s when she wanted him for the role. He was old by the time they actually made the movie, which is why they didn't use him. That's where you get Cruise and Brad Pitt and all them, because they were the younger, hotter actors at the time. But that thing lurked in Hollywood for 20 years, getting rewrites and rewrites and rewrites and different people looking at it and passing before it finally manages to make it. And man, that was a pop cultural thing, with Vampire the Masquerade and the Anne Rice kind of books and stuff. It hit a certain point and made sense all of a sudden. Nowadays, well, we haven't finished the script. We've started making the movie and we haven't finished the script. That's not a good way to make movies. The Duffer Brothers. We didn't know how the last season of Stranger Things was going to end when we started filming the season. Well, if you're trying to do a complex, tight little storyline, you might want to have done that. Are you kidding me? So you used to have scripts getting worked on. Finally, boom, we got something we can go with. Great. Now we go to the next phase, which is like storyboards, especially for action films. We storyboard the entire thing. Dude, Dave Stevens, kind of one of the things that helped him get his start was doing storyboards for one of the Indiana Jones films. It may have been Raiders of the Lost Ark. And that sort of brought him to the attention of Spielberg, or maybe Spielberg had seen his stuff and said, we got to use this guy. But the stuff he produced, this dude's awesome, helped get The Rocketeer turned into a movie because of those contacts. But you make those storyboards and you play with them, get it right and get the pacing figured out. You're doing all that stuff long before you start making a damn movie. It's a winning way to do things that they don't use anymore. And so the movies are just not that good. And that's because modern day movies with $700 million budgets are essentially Ed Wood films. Ed Wood just scraped together what he could, started filming stuff and said, well, I'll edit it into a movie at the end. I don't know. I don't know. As long as I get something together and I can distribute it to a few friggin', viewers, I'm good enough for me. Every movie, every major Hollywood movie now is essentially an Ed Wood film, which is why they're about as, critically acclaimed as Ed Wood films. you can't make Ed Wood films with $700 million budgets. You can't do this. And it is going to stop, by the way. It's going to stop. A lot of the waste and fraud and abuse on a lot of levels is kind of rolling to an end. Is there anybody left who knows how to make an actual movie? I don't know. It's a great opportunity for a studio to like just clean house, bring in some new people who understand the business of making films. Maybe some of them are old, maybe some of them are young, and forge a new path ahead. But none of them are doing it. That's for damn sure. None of them are doing it. When Jim Henson was trying to get the Muppet Show made, they didn't even want to touch him, so he had to go overseas. Yeah, make it. And when Emmett Otter finally was finished, he couldn't get the studios. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Henson had a lot of problems. And think about the Muppet Show. Again, huge cultural impact with my generation. You know, I'm not going to mention what's being done with it nowadays. But, you know, the only reason Gen X is disappointed is because we had so many great IPs that popped up that we loved when we were younger. And unfortunately, they moved on to people who were like, okay, maybe not. I think the problem isn't necessarily one of talent. It's like they don't have the same mindset. You know, so they don't want to be stewards of these properties. They want to use the properties for their own purposes, right? It's the equivalent of a woman marrying a guy saying, I can change him, you know, or vice versa. I can change her. I can mold her into what I want her to be. No. It's not how it works. You got to have respect for Superman, Batman, the Muppets, Star Wars, at a minimum, because that's what made them popular. What they were is what made them popular. Now, does that mean you can't innovate with it at all? No, of course not. Of course not. But you got to understand the core of the thing. And then from an executive standpoint, you got to pick the right people for the right roles, the right people for the right, you know, to be the director. Again, James Gunn, probably not the right guy to direct a Superman movie. It's not a talent issue. He does not have the right mindset for a Superman movie. There are people who probably do, who could have made a better Superman film for them that would have made more money and would have had a bigger impact. But they went for a guy who's just sort of, he's fringy. He's on the edge. That's what he does. That's fine. Now, Sam Raimi seems like a guy who's kind of on the fringe, right? You know, with Evil Dead and all that stuff. He's making weird movies. Makes a great Spider-Man film. Why? Okay, he's an edgy kind of fringy guy, but he has respect for the IP. He has respect for what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man, and he does his best to deliver that to the screen, and he did a pretty damn good job, you know, and really the third movie of that trilogy fails because the studio executives got involved who have no respect for anything and screwed it up to a large extent. I think if that had been a movie based on Sandman and the story he wanted to tell with Sandman, I think it would have been a pretty damn good movie. And it would have ended on a high note instead of being this mishmash of all this stuff that mostly gets memed for, like, you know, what was it, Bully Maguire. You know, that's what survives from the third Raimi Spider-Man, Bully Maguire. Because the studio got involved and they have no respect. But now you got artists who have no respect, who don't understand what makes these things funny in the first place. You know, it's just, we see it over and over and over and over and over again. I keep saying the executives are a big part of the problem. They're a big part of the problem. They got to greenlight this stuff. They got to hire the people. They got to pay the contracts. They're the problem. They control the budgets. They're the problem. They're putting the wrong people in charge of things. Like, again, you pick a documentary filmmaker from Pakistan to make a major Star Wars film. What? She doesn't have the experience for making that kind of movie. It's not even fair to her in a way, but she loves it because she's like, I got an agenda and I'm going to use Star Wars to push it. So she's got no respect for the source material and what Star Wars is. And then she also is just probably not really the right person to try to make a movie like that. And it's not because it's a woman or she's from Pakistan. If you pick anybody who's mainly a documentary filmmaker and say, here, make a sci-fi action film. I mean, unless you got a real diamond in the rough, you're going to probably have a product that's not going to measure up. I don't think that movie's being made at this point, which makes sense. But it's the executives who are really, really, really screwing this stuff up. And that's where we need to be seeing the firings. But in the Disney mechanism, Iger's not firing any of these people. Because Iger doesn't know what the hell he's doing. You know, he's all bluster. The guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's good at buying things. That's it. That's what he's good at doing. He acquires things. And he's obviously good at, you know, selling bullshit to his investors who are having a tough time of it. Man of War. Exactly. Lazily assume they can shovel in anything with the built-in audience fallacy. Yeah. You know, because again, Star Wars, and I think this goes back to what I was talking about with all the movies. Star Wars is not Jedi Force lightsabers, X-Wing fighters, etc., stormtroopers. That's the setting. That's the background. That's the set, right? You need that there, but that does not make a Star Wars movie. Star Wars, Luke, Leia, Darth Vader, Han and Chewie, R2 and C-3PO. That's Star Wars. It's the story of those characters. The rest of it is just the background. Now, you go and make a role-playing game based on Star Wars, you're going to base it on the background more than anything else. But, you know, the books that were real popular use those characters and try to continue their stories, right? You do get some new stuff in there as well. You get some new characters, but the new characters come in association with them. Maybe they can spin off. Maybe they have a great story to tell with them. But the story is about the characters. So you do the prequels. Okay, well, now you have Obi-Wan, Anakin, and what's his name? Padme, you know, and well, you still got C-3PO, and you still got Yoda, and you still got, you know, R2-D2, and all those guys are still floating around. But you do have a core of characters the story is about. It ties in with the original, and we're supposed to be watching this boy become a man and then get twisted into a monster, you know. I think the fundamentals are there for the prequels. I don't think they were executed very well. I think that's the biggest problem. I don't think they were executed very well. I think there are some different choices I would have personally made, things I would have left out that I think would have given you a tighter story about this guy's descent. Why does he turn? What makes him into a monster? I think it needed to be something more internal, which was there, but there's too much external crap. At any rate, what are we doing with the third movies? We got some nostalgic stuff pop up. We got Rey, we got Finn, but then we don't really have Finn, and Rey's everything, and there's really no compelling story to tell about her. It's like it's a friggin' mess, but we got lightsabers. You know, it's like we don't need the damn lightsabers. You got to have a core story about individuals, and it needs to be a big story because you're trying to make a trilogy out of it. You're trying to make an epic out of the thing. They're not doing that work. It's like, who gives a crap? We can use this name. We can use lightsabers. It's Star Wars. And we see that nowadays with Star Trek, which isn't actually about the core characters, believe it or not. It's really not about Spock and Kirk and McCoy, etc. It's about the situations that they get into. You learn about the characters from their way they interact with these things. And because of that, we developed a love for these characters so that when you get to the movies, we're mourning for Spock, you know, dying in Wrath of Khan, because the character has become somebody we've known for so long. We know that, but it wasn't character driven. The Star Trek was not about like the story of Kirk and Spock and how their friendship bloomed. No, that happened while you had situations going on. It's a TV series. That's how they work. Right. So, but nowadays it's really just Star Trek is transporters and phasers and the Federation and blah, 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 blah. And it tries to focus heavily on the characters. That's not Star Trek. That's Star Wars. You can't blend the two. That's just my opinion, but I think I'm onto something there. Anton says Sam Raimi was a huge Spider-Man fan. He knew what the character was like when they were originally trying to do it. They wanted another director to do it, and they said, well, that's That one kind of closes off there at the end. But about Venom, and they kept insisting because they wanted to get more action figure. Oh yeah. Oh really? I thought he wanted it to be about Sandman because he had Sandman in there, but he wanted Vulture and Mysterio. Yeah, I think the bigger problem is let's have two villains. They did it with Batman, right? First Batman. I mean, talking to like Tim Burton, is Batman versus Joker. Okay, you got a story there. Second Batman is Batman versus Catwoman and Penguin. Okay. I think you would have had a better film if it was about one or the other. Third Batman film is now going to be, what, was that Riddler and Two-Face? Right? Okay, I guess. But you could have just made it about one or the other. And then you get like Batman versus what? Poison Ivy and and it's like, dude, this double teaming on a character, but well, we can sell more action figures. Well, you can sell more action figures if the movie's good and kids like it. But if it's not, you won't sell the action figures. How many friggin' movies in the 70s basically died with these big planned toy like lines, like the Black Hole was a good example of that. You know, well, hey, we'll sell toys. Well, you only sell toys if kids really dig the film. And Black Hole's kind of dark. And it's not a Star Wars movie. It's not the kind of thing. Well, I mean, in a way, everybody kind of maybe dies. Most of the characters. So what are we playing with these characters? Star Wars works because you can imagine other adventures that Luke and Leia and all them are going to go on. You could play with but that's not really what Black Hole was. But it's like the executives fundamentally misunderstand these things. They don't think deeply about them. They see dollar signs and they go for it. They're like dogs, you know. They see dollar signs and they start to drool, you know. And fortunately, there's creatives in there that actually help them out. But now that doesn't seem to be happening. Paula has a question. Would play a great Darth Revan. Now, I got to tell you, Paula, I grew up on the original trilogy. I haven't read any of the extended stuff after that. I watched a little bit of the prequels, but didn't really like them too much. I haven't read all the comic book series. I haven't watched the sequels at all. If I'm completely honest, I don't know who Darth Revan is. So somebody else in the chat might be able to answer that question better for me. You know, Keanu Reeves has a particular acting style. And if you pick the right character for him, he does a good job with it. And if you don't pick the right kind of character for him, he doesn't do very well with it. So Ted Theodore Logan worked really well with Keanu Reeves. And he played that character really, really well, for example. But when he was in Much Ado About Nothing, didn't really work for him. And I don't think Jonathan Harker worked really well with his acting style in Dracula, the Dracula film he did. But when you pick the stuff that fits his acting style well, he does a great job. So the question I would say would be, does the Darth Revan character fit well with Keanu Reeves' acting style? And I don't mean, I'm not talking about like Ted Theodore Logan. That's comedy, you know. But like the John Wick thing seems to go really well. Is there a parallel? If there is, he'd probably do a good job with it. And one thing I've noticed about Keanu Reeves is he's a professional. He takes it seriously. I know whatever role he accepted in anything, he's going to put himself into it and try to do it right. So unless it's a role that's just not really suited to him, probably would do a good job with it, you know, because he's going to be there really trying to deliver the goods. You know, I mean, Keanu Reeves, I've liked some stuff he's done, some other stuff I wasn't that into. But the more I learn about the man himself, the more impressed I am with him. He seems like a genuinely really good dude. So I think that if he got a role like that, he would definitely be in there trying to deliver and make it great. So, but unfortunately, I don't know much about the character, so I can't really answer the question, intelligently in that way. So hopefully, though, I kind of addressed it. From Knights of the Old Republic game, yeah, I haven't played any of the games. Well, that's a lie. I played the Star Wars arcade game. No characters in that. I could get past the first Death Star. I don't know if I ever got past the second one. And I played the TIE Fighter game and had fun with that, I will say. But I haven't played that, so I don't know. But I think Keanu Reeves, if it's suited for him, I think he'd do a good job with it. Manowar says, same here, only softened toward prequels after Disney's hit job. Yeah. And agreed he was by far the weakest link in Coppola's Dracula. Yeah. I just don't think it was a character suited for Keanu Reeves. I think that's the problem with that. And there's other actors like that. John Travolta. Travolta can be great in certain films, but you take Travolta and put him into a role he's not suited for. It's got to be a variation, dramatic or comedic, on Barbarino. If you put him into that, he's good. It worked in Pulp Fiction, right? It works in Grease. He worked in Grease, but they're all variations on Barbarino. And so, again, it's sort of like Ted Theodore Logan's the comedy side. The dramatic side of Ted Theodore Logan is something that Keanu Reeves can do. But it's the same with like Cary Grant, which I guess it's his birthday today. Cary Grant was not so much an actor as in he's going to play a particular character. Cary Grant tended to play Cary Grant in movies. That's true with most leading men and leading women. They play themselves or variations on themselves in movies. Now, some actors, big time actors can kind of move away from that. But that's why you have like your leading men and ladies. And then you got your character actors, who primarily kind of bury themselves into a particular character. And then there's folks in the middle, like an Edward G. Robinson, who actually had a little more range than a lot of people think, but he tended to play a certain type in movies, in a lot of movies. But he could move away from that. So he was kind of in between leading man and character actor. But, so Cary Grant, great. I love Cary Grant. But like you can imagine a lot of roles Cary Grant just would not have worked in. And he knew that. He was selective about what kind of characters he played. Now, Jimmy Stewart, I think, was able to stretch himself a little bit more in terms of roles. I think he was a little bit more of an actor, Later on in life, he tends to play a very Jimmy Stewart kind of character. But he did a lot of different stuff, Vertigo. He did the Westerns. He did some light comedy type stuff. He could stretch around a little bit. I think with Keanu Reeves, he's a little more narrowed in what he's capable of doing. But when you give him the right project, I think he does really well and very popular. And again, he seems like a really, really great guy. Okay, let's look at, the other thing I picked up this week, the New Gods #1 facsimile that DC just put out. This is Kirby. The old gods perishing, the new gods rise. There's, you get the feeling that the old gods who are perishing might be Asgard. It might be Asgard. Look at Orion. The amazing thing about Kirby was just he was creating so many new things at such a rapid pace and had so many ideas that were rolling into it. There's this one line in here, though, I thought was amazing, because they were talking about how the bridge from like the gods to Earth had been destroyed, and that really brings to mind like Bifrost and Thor and stuff like that. But just so many new vistas he was opening up. And they only did 11 issues of this comic. And look how often Darkseid comes into the stuff that DC produces. He was in one of the Super Friends series. He's the main focus of Zack Snyder's, Justice League kind of thing. 11 issues. He was 11 issues of New Gods. I don't know that Mr. Miracle got a lot more than that. He was on Jimmy Stewart. He was on Jimmy Olsen for a while. with a lot of crazy, amazing stuff. And you look at like the Superman animated series. Was it the late 90s, early 2000s? No, not. It was early to mid 90s, right after Batman the Animated Series. Look how much of that is drawn from Jack Kirby. And you got a Jack Kirby character, in it as well with that one Turpin. He was drawn to look like Jack Kirby. But anyway, it's just amazing what this guy was able to create in such a short time at DC and how it has survived. And you got this nice little thing, A Visit with Jack Kirby, written by Lynn Wein and Marv Wolf. Well, Marv Wolf, but Lynn Wein was apparently there as well. This, though, I also wanted to show. The page opposite. Have fun and make money with hand shadows. It's a book written by a guy who was on Ed Sullivan a few times doing this. And he's going to teach you how to make some bucks doing hand shadows. But look at the one. Richard Nixon. I'm like, dude. That almost feels like a parody ad that would have shown up in something. It is so weird. Oh, there was another cool ad in here. This is one of the things I love is that they're doing the ads in these things as well. It's this life-size moon monster, and I'm like, that looks a lot like the demon in that flick. Oh shoot, what's the name of it now that I reviewed on this channel? Is it Shadow of the Demon? I'm getting the name wrong now, but it looks a lot like it. Anyhow, okay. So that's what I had new in the den. Not a whole lot. And honestly, I don't have a massive number of coming attractions to talk about either. Not a lot of stuff, just floating around at the moment. Now, this I did bring up, I think, in an earlier stream last year, but it's now available for pre-order from Fantagraphics. Corto Maltese, Fable of Venice and Other Adventures. This is a very famous old comic done by Hugh Pratt about like a sailor, like on a kind of a tramp steamer kind of thing. Really interesting stuff. It's a character I've been interested in a long time to get into and never had. Now, this is coming out March. I wrote in my notes, March 2017. So apparently you've got to time travel to get this. Did I mean March 2027? I probably meant March of 2027, although that seems way out. So ignore me on that. Go find it on Fantagraphics and see. I don't know what I wrote, why I wrote that. Again, I'm tired, so that's probably why. But it's only $20 for the book. So that's a pretty good buy-in for this thing, in terms of getting to know the character. But really beautiful art. Really something you might want to check out if you're into especially older comic strips and the way they did things back then. I noticed a 1/12 scale RoboCop based on RoboCop 2. Exquisite Super Series figure. That's what it's called. I don't know who's making this thing. I'm not positive. But it is up for pre-order at Big Bad Toy Store. It's $116 though. So a little bit steep. But if you're, way into RoboCop, might want to check it out. I've been watching the RoboCop TV series. I got I think one more episode left, and I might do a full review on it. It is an interesting series that vacillates between pretty darn good episode and, ooh, that wasn't really very good. And all the ones that aren't very good have the same reoccurring villains in them. I actually have just skipped most of those episodes after I watched 2 of them. Because I'm like, I do not like these characters. They're not good. But the ones without them, there's some decent stuff in them and some decent acting from some of the side characters. A couple of them are kind of flat, but the younger ones. But the older, it's not a bad TV series. It's not as violent and gory as the movies, because they were aimed at a younger audience by that point. But there's actually some cool stuff in it. But that's a cool looking figure. Just it's going to cost you $116. Now, Trick or Treat Studios released their new catalog for 2026. Now, Trick or Treat Studios does a lot of masks, Halloween type masks. And that's what the majority of the catalog is. So if you're into that, you want to check this catalog out for a certainty. But you do get some action figures towards the back. including some RoboCop stuff. Doesn't look to me like we're talking $116 here, but I don't know what price points are going to be on these, but also a Delta Force, which I'm like going, if that is reasonably priced, good chance I'm going to get that. Really good chance I'm going to get a Delta Force figure. They got Killer Clowns. They got Day of the Dead. They got Army of Darkness and Trick or Treat. So a few action figure type things in that catalog. It's big. I didn't realize how big this catalog is. They got a lot of stuff, but a lot of masks. So if you go to Trick or Treat Studios website, you can find the catalog. It's like a PDF, I believe. I think that's what I downloaded it as. Flip through it, dude. It'll take you a while to flip through that thing. Especially if you're into horror. You're going to find all sorts of stuff that you're going to dig. It's got a lot of really cool things. And that's like it. That's all I got for coming attractions this week. Just not an awful lot of things to talk about. But I know there are some things on the horizon. So hopefully next week. Oh, I did see one thing just before I was getting on. They've announced a 4K release of the Billy Zane Phantom movie. I have not seen Billy Zane's Phantom, and I want to, because I've heard variously good and bad things about it, but I'd like to check it out for myself. It was in that weird phase after 89 Batman, where we start getting a lot of characters set in like the 30s and early 40s, rather than just let's make superhero movies, which you did get, Marvel, Punisher, Captain America. It was like, let's do characters from comic strips in the 1930s. So you got the Rocketeer, obviously not from the 30s, but he's kind of set in that era. You got Shadow, you got Dick Tracy, you got Phantom. Now, Rocketeer, I love, unabashedly love. Dick Tracy's got its issues, but I do actually really dig that movie. Did not like the Shadow. I did not care for that at all. There's some stuff in there that's just, to me, breaks the character. I just didn't care for it. I didn't like it. But I have not seen the Phantom. So that's coming out in 4K sometime this year. You might want to go look a little more deeply into it. I would have included it. Maybe I'll include it in my stream next week, but it just kind of popped up too late for me to look at it and put a little image in. But at any rate, couple more things though. I did manage to watch a movie this week called Hellfire, a Western from 1949, directed by R.G. Springsteen. It did a lot of not Class B, a lot of B movies, a lot of Westerns TV. Stars Wild Bill Elliott, Marie Windsor, Forrest Tucker, and Jim Davis. Jim Davis you might know from Dallas. He was the head of the Ewing clan. And it was not bad. Yakima Canute did the stunts. Dude's a legend. The Lydecker brothers did the special effects. Again, legends in Republic serials, and they obviously in Westerns as well. Kind of tell you what it's about right from the get-go. Man with his misdeeds kindles his own hellfire, right? And what it basically is about is a bad man played by Bill Elliott who is turned into a preacher when a preacher saves his life. And so he decides, I'm going to build the church this guy wanted to build. He was trying to raise money for. And as a result, he actually reads the Bible and it means something to him. So he's kind of changed his ways, and he runs into a bad woman played by Marie Windsor. And that's what she played in a lot of film noirs and stuff. She's really great at that stuff. She was a saloon girl. She married a guy who basically just kind of shipped her younger sister out west on a wagon train. And she eventually got away from that guy, and she becomes like a highwayman or highway woman as she looks for her sister, because she figures nothing good happened to her, but she's bound and determined to find her. Meets with this guy played by Bill Elliott. And then she's being hunted by a marshal played by Forrest Tucker. There's some interesting little twists in the story. It's not done. Elliott is a little flat in his role, but it kind of worked sometimes for the character he was playing. Windsor was great in the role. it's not a bad little Western. You know, it's not one of the greats by any means, but it was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. But again, ending's a little bit sappy. But it works if you just kind of accept that going in, you know, if you're not expecting something else, it's not too bad. But that's about the only thing I've really watched lately. Oh, Manowar says Arrow has a 4K release of Excalibur end of next month as well. Decent looking set. I think I might have talked about that in an earlier stream. I'm not positive. That's the thing. Some of these things pop up so early that then they'll pop up again like months later. And I'm like, well, I think I talked about that. Maybe I'll talk about it again. For all I know, I talked about that Phantom thing sometime before too. My God, a lot of lives. 49th. This is my 49th live stream. Seems crazy. Let's sort of end with my favorite thing I found on the internet this week. And it's this image of a kid reading comic books, probably at a newsstand. Man, that just kind of like, if you're a comic book guy, you're going, yeah, that just looks rad. And I did a little bit of looking in. The kid is reading Ha Ha Comics number 44. It came out in 1947. I didn't find, it's August. So that's August of 47 is what he's reading. Behind him, you'll find Captain Marvel Adventures number 55 from March of 46. That must have hung around for a while. Superman number 48 from September of 47. Blondie number 3 from September of 47. Nyoka the Jungle Girl number 7 from May of 1947. So we're probably in somewhere around September of 47. But the other one you see up in the corner, which is maybe considered kind of infamous now, it shouldn't be, but is All Negro Comics. Number 1, and there was really only one issue from July of 1947, which was done entirely black characters and black creators. And it was an anthology. And it just was interesting to me that like I'm kind of scanning and I'm like, oh my God, that's up in the corner, you know, because I've read about it before, that it existed, but I had never, you know, sort of seen it out in the wild, so to speak. So there you go. I thought that was kind of a cool image. Coming up this week on Dad's Den, we got Thor number 339 as we go through the Walt Simonson run every Monday. On Wednesday, I got a review of the Old Republic serial Spy Smasher from 1942. Pretty cool little serial. And on Friday, I'm going to do a little flip through of, maybe you could argue, the first miniatures war game. Although there were war games before that. But it is Little Wars by H.G. Wells from 1913. Yeah, H.G. Wells, the sci-fi guy, he played with toy soldiers and he invented a game. And it's really kind of a cool little book because he goes through how the game was created and then you get the full rules for the game. It's pretty simple. Requires some equipment that's kind of hard to find now. And I looked, but we'll talk about that on Friday when I do the review. So that's what's coming up. Thor 339, Spy Smasher, and Little Wars. And Manowar says, Lakeside News and K&B drugstores, spinner racks were my houses of ill repute. Both decades long gone now. Yeah, for me, it was 7-Eleven. A lot of the first comics I ever got that I still got off the rack at 7-Eleven. It's also where I got heavy metal, because they didn't know what heavy metal was. I think they thought it was a heavy metal magazine. And there was nudity in it. And you could just get it off it wasn't like behind the counter like some of the other stuff was. So once me and my buddy Josh found that out, it was off to the races on European comics. Ooh la la. But I see also Mr. Sushi says, recently I watched a 1989 Finnish film called The Winter War. It was a relatively realistic portrayal. Oh, yeah, man, that is some crazy stuff. The Finns' experience in World War II. I know they just made the movie, and I think they're doing a sequel. Oh, what the heck was that called? Maybe a year or so ago, about a sniper. Well, I don't think he was a sniper. I think he was just a regular guy who the Germans mess with, and he just goes and takes them all out. Maybe somebody in the chat remembers what that was called. I can't remember now. But yeah, the Finns, don't mess with the Finns. Don't mess with the Finns. They're hardcore. They are hardcore. And the ancient Vikings, we call them ancient now. I don't know if it's ancient when the Vikings were floating around, but the Vikings considered all Finns to be witches and warlocks. They have an elfin look about them. And I know Tolkien used Finnish, as an inspiration for the elven language in Middle Earth. At least one of the elven languages was somewhat based on Finnish. Very interesting group of people. Their national epic is really, really cool. Yeah, the Finns are very cool. So that's probably good. Sisu, thank you, Man of War. Yeah, Sisu, that was it. I know, I was like going, it's a name, and I cannot think of what the dude's name is. Sisu, yeah. So they're doing a sequel to that, I think. I don't think it's out yet, but I think it's maybe coming out this year. That was popular. And again, another movie without a huge budget that did pretty damn well in the theaters. That is the future, whether they know it or not. Mr. Sushi, I should look. Yeah, it's apparently it's bloody as hell. It's basically this dude tracking these Germans down and just wreaking unholy revenge upon them. So I don't think it's done in a realistic way, like what you were talking about. But if you just want to watch like basically the Punisher taking out bad guys, I think Sisu would probably be pretty good for you. Well, folks, that will do it. What are we at? Oh, man, an hour 20. And I told my wife this morning, I go, I don't know that I have that much to talk about. If I don't get some good chat stuff going, it could be a really short stream. But we did have a great chat with Mr. Sushi Hut, Man of War 665, neighbor of the beast, finished John Wick. Yeah, I think that's how a lot of people described it. Paula, 1966. Glad that Paula chimed in, and I wish I knew more about Darth Revan that I could have helped you with there. We got Anton in the chat today. Who else? Did we get Ramey in? I don't think Ramey was in today. He must be busy. We got Adam, 2208, 2208. All those numbers, man. It's tough. And, of course, Lady Wendelin in charge of everything and in charge of me. And she's getting ready, maybe already left, for a hair appointment. So I need to wind this one up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week to Dad Live in the Den. I will see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den. But in the meantime, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And, keep on keeping on. I will see you later.